Hi, my name is Christy and I'm the creator of the Decorative Studio. I've been wrapping decorative wraps since 2013 and I'm happy to introduce an online school that teaches you how to do decorative wraps from start to finish. Anyone can take these classes regardless if you're a beginner or looking for a more advanced style of wrap. Each course focuses on an individual pattern that walks you through planning, wrapping, and completing a wrap. So if you're ready to learn how to complete a decorative wrap, sign up and let's start wrapping.
G'day everybody. Welcome to the VisualWRAP question and answer session for March 10, 2021. I'm hoping you can see me okay and hear me okay. After last week's effort, I managed to turn off the presentation at the time I was meant to start. Hopefully I've done it better this time. So in the last week, I've managed to coordinate with Billy and Mary, come up with a good agenda of topics loosely based on the feedback we've had during the last session, and also had a haircut, and hopefully the glare on the screen isn't too bright from my balding head. Tonight we're doing this question and answer session in support of the VisualWRAP challenge, which we're running throughout the month of March. Now, the rules of this challenge are simple. Create or choose a pattern from VisualWRAP. Wrap that pattern on a rod and post pictures of the finished wrap and the pattern screenshotted from VisualWRAP. The winner of this challenge will be you. You'll learn how to use the software if you don't already know how to do so, and you'll learn to improve your wraps. We're here to ensure that you get the most out of using the software and doing your wrapping. So feel free to ask questions of myself, post questions on the NERB site and on the Southern Rod Builders site. Hopefully you enjoyed the introduction video by Mary and introducing her Decorative Wrap School. It's a great opportunity to learn how to do wraps at pace at your own speed. You can sign up for whichever particular courses appeal to you most, and it's a great way to learn to do these wraps guided by a very qualified and talented rod builder and thread artist. Also, I hope you enjoyed the slideshow of people who have already made entries into the Decorative Wraps Challenge. I'm blown away all the time by the number of people who post awesome pictures of wraps they've done. For me, it's just, it closes the loop. 20 years ago when I published the software, I hoped that one day it would help some people to do more patterns and improve their skills. And now we're at the stage where people attempting their first few wraps are managing to put out some awesome quality work. And I think that's testament to Billy and the effort that he does with the NERBs and Mary and others who help and devote their time to making sure people are on the right track. So tonight, the agenda, as you can see over my shoulder, we'll be covering how to create thread colors in the software. I'll be going over how to create a script. So I'll start with nothing and we'll build up that script. I'll probably make some mistakes along the way. That's fine. That's all part of it. You can learn from my mistakes. Hopefully it shortens your learning curve. Once we've built that script, I'll go into how to do some basic shading in VisualWRAP. Now, when I wrote the software, shading wasn't even a thing. And if I could go back in time, I would, and I'd rewrite the software so that it included shading. In spite of that limitation, people have found ways of using the software to incorporate shading in their wraps. So I'd like to demonstrate at least one method of doing that. It's quite crude, but it is a way of modifying wraps so that they do show shading. I'll then have a quick review of sizing. Last week when I was talking about the taper view window and how to size patterns to suit your rod, I spoke through how I use the butt and tip diameters to calculate actual spacings for your rod. And I'd like to touch on that again. I think it's a very important topic because once you've created your pattern and you're happy with the colors and you're happy with the number of repeats, it's very important that you're able to then transfer those starting measurements onto your blank. Otherwise, you will struggle. So I'd like to cover that review of sizing tonight. And then we'll finish up with a quick talk about the history of the thread art is not a crime logo. I'm quite proud of that logo, and I'd like to just quickly talk about what inspired me to put that together, so that when you see it in the future, you'll understand some of the meaning that it has for me. So without further ado, I'd like to share my VisualWRAP screen, and to do that, I come over here, and hopefully you can now see my screen. One of the questions that was asked during the session last week was, how do I create new colors to add to a spool library, or to create my own spool library? And the answer is it's very simple, and hopefully you find it intuitive. Along the top of the screen, you see this spools toolbar, and it's showing the spools that have been selected from the currently loaded spool library. So if I go to more colors, double click on that, you can see at the moment the library that is loaded is the NURBS Shade Packs library. So Billy has spent a lot of time going through the Madeira shades of threads that are available, and has collected those into various named shades of different colors, and saved those as a spool library. Now, it may be that you have a particular set of colors that aren't available in the standard libraries, or perhaps you'd simply just like to create a custom set of colors in your own spool library to suit your own use. So typically you would start with an image. For me, I did a quick search tonight, and I downloaded an image of a Madeira color chart. The image that you load maybe is a logo. It might be your favorite team's logo, or the colors of an object that you're trying to match. Maybe it's the colors of the boat that you're building the rod for, whatever it is. You want to start with a soft copy, an image of the colors that you're trying to match. So what I've done is I've done my search on Google Images. I've found this thread chart, and I've saved that. I've used the snipping tool in Windows to save that as a JPEG or a PNG image. And I've then opened that up. I've double clicked on the image that I've saved, and it's opened up in my Windows Photos viewer. If I right click within this viewer, it says Edit and Create, and I can edit this with Paint 3D. Now, when I click on that, the Paint 3D application will launch. And just to make it clear, I don't intend to edit any of these colors. All I'm interested in are what are the red, green and blue component colors making up the colors that I'm interested in. The VisualWRAP thread libraries rely on these RGB colors to define the colors that it needs to display. So now that this thread chart has loaded into the Paint 3D application, what I can do is use this Paint or eyedropper tool to put my cursor over any of these colors that I'm interested in. Now, let's just say that I'm interested in this bright blue. I'm putting my cursor over a bright blue. Perhaps I don't have that in any of the other thread libraries I have, and I really want to add that to my spool library. So I click on that color that I'm interested in, and when I do that, you'll notice that on the right hand side the app has picked up that color. So if I click on that color, it now tells me what the red, green and blue components of that color happen to be. So if it was me, I'd be writing those colors down. So the red is 1, the green is 199, and the blue is 219. So those three numbers are enough for other applications to reproduce that color. So for now, I'll just cancel out of that and I'll close down that application. So now that I'm in a particular library, what I can do is look at these images in the toolbar on the library window, and third along is new color. So if I click on that, pops up on my other screen, I've got the opportunity to define a color. So if I click on define color, I then have this color picking tool, and at the bottom of that is a button that says define custom colors. So let's do that. I click on define custom colors, and you'll see that on the right hand side there are these three boxes saying red, green and blue. So because I've written down those RGB colors from the Paint 3D app, I know that the red component I'm interested in is 1. The green component I'm interested in is 199. And then the blue component is 219. 219. And then as soon as I do that, you'll see that this color is the color that I wanted from the color chart. So I'll say add that to custom colors and say OK. And when you do that, VisualWRAP has now picked up that blue that you've just created. And I'm going to call that Boyle's blue, simply because I can. And if I say OK or accept that, and then scroll down to the end of my spool library, suddenly Boyle's blue appears in the NURBS Shade Packs library. And what I can do is double click a spool from VisualWRAP, choose that color, and I can now use that in one of my wraps. So hopefully that is a good enough explanation to help you create your own color libraries. It all comes down to getting the RGB components of the colors that you're interested in. So the next topic I'd like to start on is creating a script. And what I'll do is I will start with the script that I'd like to end up creating, just so that you have an idea of what it is that we're trying to achieve. So I'll clear the current pattern, and I've prepared earlier this spider script. I check that I'm in the auto wrapping mode, and when I click wrap, this simple spider pattern wraps. So that is what we would like to achieve, and I'll take us through how I've come up with this simple script. So let's create a new script. Do I want to save this pattern script? No, I don't. Am I sure I want to clear this pattern script? Yes, I am. I can give this pattern a title. So we're going to call this the new spider and say OK. And then it asks us to give the first section a name, and we'll call this part of the section the spider body. Now you may ask, what is a section? Well, I'll show you what a section is as we go through, and explain the importance of sections and how they help us to build up patterns one piece at a time. I like to think of sections as being stages in a recipe. When we wrap threads, we wrap them in a sequence, and that sequence will repeat. Without sections, there'd be no way of the software knowing which part of the pattern has to repeat before the next part of the pattern starts. So for example, in tonight's pattern, we're going to be creating the body of a spider and then doing a background. So in our first section, we're going to create the spider's body, and that will wrap to completion. And then we'll create a second section which contains the background. So the sections help us to segregate or compartmentalize the pattern into different areas, and those areas get wrapped to completion before the next section starts. So to create any pattern, I always use the script builder. So by clicking on the builder, up pops this script builder. Now, who knows the sequence for building a spider? I guess if you know, click like. And if you don't know, click like as well. It's important that you click lots of likes on Facebook as I'm learning over time. The basic sequence for building a spider is a cross which moves outwards and a box which moves outwards as well. And if the box moves outwards with a plus progression, then the legs of the spider will be slightly curved. So with that in mind, we're going to start by defining where our initial cross is going to go. So we're going to do a cross that goes out, and we're also going to do a box which goes out with a +1 progression. So from my script builder, I've selected a cross layout. Here are the layouts I can choose. A thread going in that direction, spiraling upwards, a thread spiraling down, a cross, or a box. We're going to start with the cross, and for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to choose the first spool thread. So I select the colors of the threads I'd like to change, and then I select spool number 1. So it picks up that first purple color in the spools toolbar. The Y coordinate will always place at 50, and that means that's halfway down this repeat window. So it means the Y coordinate will always be 50, which means our pattern will be centered horizontally on the, or vertically, sorry, along the pattern window. So we're interested to know where we should place the initial cross. So it's simplest if we place that cross dead center. So halfway down and halfway across on a scale of 1 to 100 is 50-50. So our X coordinate is going to be 50, and our Y coordinate is going to be 50. Over here, once we've defined the layout, we define the progression. And the progression that we're interested in is this cross moving outwards. So I click this outwards symbol. Each time it moves outwards, we're going to use the same number of threads, which means we're going to choose a band. And for this pattern, we're going to choose a band of 1 thread. We're going to begin with 1 thread. And for this, we're going to make, I think it's 8 passes. We'll say 8 passes. And then, as I've been making these selections, the line of script has been building up here. And as I make changes, that line of script changes. It adjusts accordingly. And then what I do, when I'm happy with the selections that I've made, I hit the append button, which appends this preview text to the end of the current script. So if I hit append, you'll notice that what was being created in the script builder is suddenly transferred to our script window. We now have created a line of script which is across, starting in the center, which is 50-50, using spools 1 for both threads. It's moving outwards. It's going to use a single thread each time. It's starting with 1 thread. It's going to make 8 passes. And that %1 is whether it's elongated or compressed. We're going to use a square pattern, which means the spacing will be 1. If I hit delay and then hit wrap, you'll see that that cross is wrapping outwards. And if you were to count those passes, it's doing that 8 times. Okay, so far so good. Now within this section, as this cross moves outwards, we also want a box to move outwards as well with a +1 progression. And to do that, we come down here and we select the box layout. So a box is 4 threads or 2 crosses, and that's what VisualWRAP shows here in the script builder. We can set the colors of those threads. For this tutorial, I'd like to use spool number 2 to be the box, which will basically be the background. So if I select all of those threads, that one, that one, that one, and that one, come up to the thread chooser and choose spool number 2. It now sets spool number 2 for those 4 threads. We know that the y coordinate is going to be 50. And we could calculate where we want the threads or the starting points of the box to start based on the fact that we had laid 8 threads down to start with. We can also use this place option to manually place the first coordinate, then the second coordinate. So if I come down, now that I've clicked place, and click in the first position, as I do that, it updates the x1 coordinate, which you can see down here. If I come back and then place the second coordinate, which I know is going to be 58 because we started at 50 and we wrapped 8 times. I click there. We have now positioned these 2 starting points to be 42 and 50 along the x-axis. We want that to move outwards. And so we've selected outwards. We want to use a +1 progression. So let's select plus as the progression type and 1. We could increase the number or decrease the number of the progression. We're going to use +1. And we are going to use 8 passes. So the script builder has built up this line of script. We're going to say append. Now, let's see what that does. I'm going to start by putting it into single mode and click on wrap. So it says wrap has started. Use the next button to lay threads. Okay, so the first threads that are laid, which are highlighted in the script, are going to be the cross. So wrap, it wraps the 2 threads of the cross, and now it starts to wrap the box. So if I go next, 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 it has laid the crosses that make up the box starting at 42 and 58, just as we told it to. So if I go next, it'll do the next set of cross passes, and then it will do the next set of background passes, which will be 2 because it was the second pass and it's a +1 progression. So if I go into delay, it'll continue to wrap that pattern. And you can see the spider slowly starts to form. And pretty soon you should see the spider's legs are getting longer all the time, and the background is continuing to wrap. Okay, it's finished wrapping. We'll say okay. Let's just see what would happen if instead of 8 passes on the background, I had 7 passes on the background. So I change that to 7 passes. Go into auto, click wrap. We can see that the pattern, the background stops wrapping after 7 passes, and there's one more pass of the spider's legs, which would then join up the various different spider bodies. And if we see what that looks like as a pattern, that's what it looks like. For now, let's go back to the single repeat view, and let's now manually put in a background. So we know we needed the spider pattern to form in the first section. We now need to create a second section to do the background. So to do that, I put my cursor at the end of the last line of script, and I hit the builder button again. Up pops the script builder, and what I'm going to do is use a box moving outwards to fill in the background. So again, I can either calculate where I want the box to start, or I can place the coordinates. Let's place the coordinates. It's a little easier. So I've clicked the place check button. I then move my cursor, and I want this to start wrapping at, say, 1350. And the other starting point, the other corner of the box, is going to be 8750. So having clicked there, it's picked up the 13 and 87 as the coordinates. We want this background to move outwards, so we select the outward progression. I'm going to use single bands of threads, and not quite sure yet how many passes I need. I could probably work it out. If I'm starting at 13 and I'm moving outwards, I probably need 13 threads to close. Let's just say we didn't know how many threads it took to close, and I guessed it was going to be 10 passes. I would then say, well, if I was to say append, it's going to add that line of script to the current section, which we don't want. We want a brand new section to house this line of script. So let's create a new section by clicking on the S button. So when I click on that, it asks me if I'd like to give the section a name. So let's call it the background. You don't have to give the section a name. It just helps if your pattern is particularly complicated. So I'll say OK. And now when I click append, we see that the line of script which we have just created for the background appears in the second section called background. So now if I click on wrap, we see that the spider forms, and then the background starts wrapping, and it runs out before it fully closes the background. So if I look at the number of repeats that I specified, I said there were 10 passes in this background. Let's make that 12. Try to wrap again. Almost there. Let's make it 13. And there you go. So we've just created our first script, which is a new spider. I can see what that looks like with multiple repeats. So, okay. Maybe I'd like to change colors. Maybe instead of pink 2, I'm using Boyle's blue that I just created. How does that look? Don't know that I like that. I'll try to go back to that pink 2 that was somewhere. In fact, it's not really important what I change it back to. Let's choose this one because it is some type of pink. In fact, that is the pink 2 right here. And if I wrap again, so there we have a spider script created from scratch, and the importance of using sections. Now, just to show what would happen if I took out that section, and here's a hint. If you want to remove something that's in your script, you could either manually delete it. So if I go Control X, I could delete that and then remove that line. Or if I put that back in, if I use the exclamation mark is like if you have a coding background, it's a comment. So it tells the software, or it tells VizwrapQA, please ignore everything that's on the rest of this line. So for example, if I was to put the exclamation mark on the last line of script, and if I hit wrap, it means it's going to wrap the pattern without the background, because the exclamation mark has masked out that background. So if I then take away that exclamation mark, but I still have masked out the section, and click wrap, clear then wrap, what it's going to do is it is going to wrap the spider body and the initial part of the spider at the same time as the background. So what do you think is going to happen here? Let's have a look. If I click wrap, we get some weird looking spider with joined legs and pointy bits at the end. So, and maybe you like that pattern. Maybe that's what you'd like to use for your VisualWRAP challenge wrap. I mean, you're welcome to. You might even want to shade that and make it a bit prettier. But for me, I think I'd like to have the background form properly. So I'm going to take out that exclamation mark, which then reinstates the background section. If I go clear and go wrap, then we're back to having our spider wrap, which is good. Okay. So let's now spend a little bit of time talking about basic shading. So there are multiple ways you can shade patterns, and for this particular tutorial, what I'd like to do is simply shade the background box. So to demonstrate what I mean, first of all, I'm going to take away the spider body from this pattern. I could do that by using the exclamation mark to mask out the various lines of script, but there's a neater way of doing that, and that's using the scope button. So when I hit scope, what this little tool does is it looks at what sections have been created, and it can see that we've created one section, the spider body, and one section for the background. So what we will do is turn off the spider body. Okay, so when I click clear, it then wraps. It's simply wrapping the background. I could go back to scope and turn on the body again and click wrap, and we have the whole pattern wrapping again. Another way of demonstrating what I'm about to do is I could make the background spool number 3. And that's just showing you, oops, sorry, I shouldn't have done that yet. I should have told it which we're going to change. So our background, instead of using spool 2, let's use spool 3. Spool down, 3 and 3. When I do that, you can see that we have this green spool number 3 as the background. So what we want to do right now is manually shade this background. To manually shade in VisualWRAP, we need to explode the script. And by explode, what I mean is this single line is a box which is moving outwards, and it moves outwards 13 times. We don't have 13 lines of script. We have a loop which cycles around 13 times. So for this part of the script, what we're going to do is explode this into 13, or we could explode it into 13 boxes. But to save time, what I'm going to do is shade with 2 colors at a time. And first of all, what I'd like to do is set up my shading colors. So I'm going to use spools 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as my shading colors. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, I had a look, and I like the violet colors. So I'm going to use colors starting with violet 1, violet 2, violet 3, and so on. 4, 5, and 6. So the shading that I'd like to use is going to use spools 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what I need to do is explode this background into basically 6 boxes, each that are moving outwards relative to the last one, and then I manually change the colors within those boxes. So to do that, we have our first box here, which is starting in the right place, starting at 1387. At the moment, it's moving outwards 13 times. Let's tell it to make 2 passes rather than 13. And if I was to do that, the 2 passes are those threads you can see bordering the spider there. So that's the first box of width 2 that I've placed. I want to place another box outside of that. Again, the same size, it'll be 2 passes or a width of 2, but instead of using spool 3, we next want to use spool 4. So to do that, what I do, the simple way, is to copy that line of script. I've highlighted it. I'll go Control-C to copy it. I'll then hit Enter, Control-V to paste that. So I've copied the same line of script. What I need to do is move the coordinates so they're going outwards. So X started at 13. It wrapped twice. So the next X should be 13 minus 2 is 11. And on the other side, I started at 87, wrapped twice, so I now need to go to 89. And instead of using spool 2, we're now up to spool 3. Sorry, instead of using spool 3, we're now up to spool 4. So I go 4, 4 for the first set of crosses, and 4, 4 for the other side of the box. So when I wrap that, what you can see happening now is we've got 2 bands. And if I repeat that, and I go, I basically know that I need to do that about 6 times. So the first X was 13, then it becomes 11, and then I need lines for, I'll just space this out so that, oops, so it's not too confusing. 13, 11, 9, and hit Enter, paste it again. I'm hitting Control-V to paste. 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, 3, possibly 1. So 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, 3, and 1. That's the x coordinates on this side. So the x coordinates on the other side need to increase by the relative same amounts, same relative amounts. So 87, 89 becomes 91, and then 93, and then 95, and then 97, and then 99. In each case, there's going to be 2 repeats or 2 passes, except for the last. Because we're at 99, we only need one pass to close that in. And then the spool colors that we're going to use, we've already used spools 3 and 4. So we've used spools 3 and 4. So we're now going to use spools 5, 6, 7, 8, and we could use another spool or use 8 again, or even increase number of passes to 3. So we go spool up, and then the spool down will be the same colors: 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Could be 9, but we're going to use 8. And then the same thing here: 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. So we're telling it what spool numbers to use for the threads as they move outwards. If I hit wrap, what do we see? We see if I go clear and then wrap, I can see a stray color, and it's because I used spool 9, which is the grip color. I'm going to change that back to spool 8. Let's try that again. And there we have our spider pattern, which has been manually shaded by exploding the box and repeating those lines of script, and then manually updating the spools to use. Now, just looking at that, I don't really like the transition from this pink 2 color to spool number 3. So what I'm going to do is change spool 2 to match spool number 3. So spool 3 is violet 1. So I'm going to change pink 2 to be violet 1. Now when I hit wrap, how about that? I like that. So by playing around with coordinates, layouts, sections, you can create an infinite variety of scripts and patterns. So now that we've seen how to create a pattern and shade that pattern, we now need a way of transferring the layout marks onto our rod. So the important crossing points for this particular pattern are the crossing points at the center of the spider. If we knew where to place that initial cross on our rod, we would then be spacing that rod to close nicely, spacing that pattern to close nicely on our rod. If I look at the scope and simply want to wrap the spider body, and rather than wrapping all the threads, just the layouts, if I hit wrap now, it'll put those layouts directly over the existing pattern. But if I hit clear and then hit wrap, what we can see on the screen there is the initial layout cross and then the surrounding box. So what we want to do is know where to place this cross and these crosses on our blank, adjusted for the taper of the rod. So what I mentioned last week, and I'd like to revisit quickly here now, is the taper view window. And that taper view window shows us how that pattern gets adjusted for taper based on spacings that we put. So How do we know what spacings to put here? What I'm about to do is turn on my camera again and hold up a blank and demonstrate what it is I'm trying to do, and you should get a good idea. So what I can do is, for starters, I can print out these layout threads. In fact, before I did that, what I would be inclined to do is wrap the whole pattern, all of it. Okay, I'd wrap that whole pattern. I would go to the taper view window and I would print that pattern out. I would then go through the exercise of just printing out the layout threads as well. Now if I turn on my camera, you should be able to see me, and this is an imaginary rod that I'm mocking up and about to build, and here is where I'd like to place my cross wrap pattern, my decorative wrap pattern. So I've printed out the pattern and I've got a good idea of what it's going to look like. I'm happy with the colors. I'm working out the sizing now. I can look at that and get a very quick indication of what it's going to look like on my rod without ever having to raise a spool of thread. As well as wrapping the whole pattern and printing that out, I can print out the taper views showing just the layout threads. And by doing that, it will tell me where I need to place those layout threads on the rod. I could also print out a spacing table and use those spacings to put marks onto the rod at the appropriate locations. I much prefer to use a printout of the spacing layout, and then fold that over, and then at those crossing points make the marks on my rod. So hopefully you can see those three marks that I've made align with the crossing points on the blank. Message received, I forgot to turn on my camera. I'm sorry about that. So here we have the blank that I'm mocking up, and here is a printout of the actual pattern, and here is an image of the pattern on the rod. Here we have the layout threads, which are printed true to size. I can hold that up against my blank. And I can then mark the spacings on the blank in the right locations. Once I have those initial spacings, that is what I need in order to have the correct layout for my tapered offset layout for the rod. And I'm confident then this pattern is going to close nicely. Hopefully all that made sense. Sorry about the camera mix-up. What I'd like to do now is spend a couple of minutes talking about the Thread Art is Not a Crime logo. So a number of years ago, I saw an image, it was probably on Facebook, that said skateboarding is not a crime, and for some reason it made me laugh, and I thought that's got a lot of attitude, and it's somewhat defensive. It's almost like justifying your passion to others, and giving a reason for why you should be able to do what you love. So when I started following the NERBs more and more, I started seeing posts of street art by one of the NERBs, James DeCono, and he has an eye for picking out some fascinating and colourful street art and graffiti and wonderful artwork and posting those. They give awesome inspiration for different patterns, different colour combinations, even ideas for tattoos. And I liked the idea of graffiti, and at around the same time, I saw Mary's sugar skull wrap that she posted on the Southern Rod Builders Facebook group, and I'd never seen shading like that. Amazing, vivid colours that seem to flow seamlessly one into the other, and I thought that's awesome. At around the same time, I was thinking I need to come up with a logo, and was racking my brain as to how to do this. I don't consider myself a particularly artistic person. In fact, when it comes to art, all I can do is draw straight lines. I was very good at tech drawing in high school, and straight lines is where it's at for me. And I think that's why VisualWRAP works, because it's all about straight lines. But I started to think about the street art and the graffiti, and I thought, okay, so my logo should be some sort of graffiti. And then I thought, well, graffiti is normally on a brick wall, so let's make the brickwork out of spools of thread. So I played around with some ideas and came up with a very crude tessellating pattern of spools, which became my canvas. And by making all of the spools grey and very boring, I thought this needs some colour and graffiti to liven it up. I then recalled the skateboarding's not a crime, and I thought, well, actually thread art's not a crime. And so often, especially in the earlier days, I'd see posts on various bulletin boards and Facebook pages saying why we shouldn't be doing thread art, because it makes the rod 0.00001 of a gram heavier, and it doesn't let the rod vibrate to its natural resonance, and it impacts performance, and others can't seem to get the same results, and so no one else should be able to do it. Well, I rebelled against that and thought, no, thread art's not a crime, and we should be able to do what we love. So those were the elements that went into making the logo, and hopefully the Technicolor background, which was inspired by Mary's sugar skull wrap, gives it a little bit of brightness. Since then, I've used that logo in stickers and on a shirt. In fact, the back of this shirt that I'm wearing has that logo on it, and over time I intend to be making more use of that logo. But I'd like to thank those that have inspired me with different thread art that they've posted over the years and over time, and that's helped to, I think, push me to where I am at this stage in my rod building career. And that's not actually making rods, it's making tools to help others make rods. And I think I'm starting to see some of the great results of that, and the collaboration which is now underway with myself, with Billy and Mary, helping and trying to extend the art, helping the rod building community, and sharing our skills and ideas. Hopefully you're able to participate in the VizwrapQA challenge, and even the challenge that Mary is running at the moment, the Pinwheel challenge. There was a promo at the beginning for Mary's Decorative Wrap School. Shortly I'll turn over to another promo for the Pinwheel challenge, and by participating in any of these challenges, it should help you to extend yourself. It's not a competition against anyone else. Everyone, moves through life at their own pace, and the only comparison should be with yourself and how can you improve yourself and your own skills. We're all here to help each other improve, and if we can offer some tips and tricks on how to use software, or provide courses that show in some detail in a format that's friendly and familiar how to do certain wraps, then hopefully that's a good step forward. So we're almost out of time tonight. Thank you everyone for your participation. Again, sorry for the mix-up with the camera a little earlier. I've almost got the hang of this new software that I'm trying to master, but I think each time we run these presentations, we will improve. I'll be debriefing later on with Billy and Mary about what worked and what didn't, and what we should include next time. I haven't been able to look at the questions posted on the feed as we've gone along. I'm hoping that some questions have come up. If not, you're welcome to add questions afterwards. And if you're looking at a recording of this video after the event, please add questions, and we'll address what we can. We intend to run at least 2 more of these throughout the month of March for the next 2 Wednesdays, being Wrap Wednesdays. I look forward to seeing what sort of feedback there is. And if you have any suggestions or ideas along the way, reach out. Remember, there's the VisualWRAP users book on Facebook. That's the ideal place to post your questions on scripts or shading or patterns or anything to do with VisualWRAP. Everyone there is looking to help each other. There are experts there. There are absolute beginners there. People just interested in wanting to find out more about the software. So look at that Facebook group, join up, and I hope you achieve something by doing so. If nothing else, then at least finding out about the software and some of the amazing wraps that others are doing. Continue to send in your pictures for the VizwrapQA challenge and also the Pinwheel challenge. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for your participation tonight. Thanks for your patience and your attention. And I will turn you over to the final promotion for the night. And at the end of that, there'll be a closing slide. And thanks for your participation, and good night.
In this course, we will be wrapping the pinwheel pattern, laying out a 4-axis wrap, and shading in bands of color instead of using a ratio shade. So if you want to learn how to turn this into this, sign up and let's start wrapping.